Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to finish it up. We're going to wrap it all up. It's been a long 5 weeks, but for this one here, part 5 of our series, we're going to conclude our chair/stool build. So the first thing we want to work on the build today, of course, is that support or that brace that goes directly underneath the seat on the front set of legs for the chair. I spoke about it at the end of last week's show, and that's where we're going to start with this week. So what I'd like to do is have that piece attached to the side profiles using mortise and tenon joinery. So I'm going to start off by marking the mortises in the side profile pieces, cut them out roughly with my trim router, just like I did with the back supports, and then I'm going to clean them up with a chisel. Then of course we're going to head over to the table saw, we're going to cut those tenons, and we're going to put it all together just for that front brace piece. We've got the brace cut, and you can see it right here. And I'll just pop this out, maybe. It's a tight fit. But I just want to point out that if you're going to go the mortise and tenon route on this, it's only really a 3/4 tenon. You can see here that I've left this side flush. And the reason for that is that once this all gets put into place, it will be at your seat will sit flush on here, and of course you don't want that little gap. So just remember that it's only like a 3/4 tenon, and that of course there is the front brace that will help support everything in the front end of the seat, and of course make this whole front assembly just that much stronger. So as I said in the last segment, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to route all the edges of the shelves, give them either a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 of an inch depending on my clearance round over, and then we're going to get into the assembly of this thing. I've got all the edges rounded on each one of the shelves or steps depending on which orientation the chair is in, and in the front I used a 1/8 round over only because there's a little less clearance on the front end where the shelf doesn't overhang. On the upper step, which will end up being in the ladder configuration at the top, I did a 1/4 inch round over, and I did a 1/4 inch round over in that front seat brace with the mortises and the tenons that we just did here in the front end of the chair. It's really up to you what you want to do with it. I've decided that on this chair, other than the screws which hold the hinge, I don't want any metal joinery. I don't want any screws. I don't want any nails. And I gave that some serious thought, and I think the reason I don't is just because it seems that everyone always goes back to the old the way of screwing it in to get some strength. But I'm not going to do that here. I've already gone to the time and the effort of doing mortise and tenon, and I think what I'd like to do for things like the seat tops, I'd like to have hidden dowel joinery for that. And for the steps, other than the glue holding the steps in the dados, I'd actually like to do an exposed dowel that will pin it right in through the side. And I think that the round, darker circle will give a nice little accent on the side of the chair to hold those shelves securely in place. So let's start with that, and what we're going to start with is drilling the holes for our dowels in our side upright pieces. I've got the chair completely disassembled, and all I have sitting on the bench now is just the side profile pieces. Now, the glue joint in these dados, that would be sufficient to hold this chair, you know, with some good quality wood glue. I have no doubt of that. But where these are going to be used as steps, they're going to be taking some abuse, and I'd like to get the extra support. So what I'm going to do here now, in each of these dados, I'm going to mark the dead center of each one. Then I'm going to center punch that mark, and I'm going to drill a 1/4 inch hole straight through each one of these and out through the other side. Now when you do that, you want to make sure that you've got a backer board here to avoid any tear out. I'm going to be using a good brad point bit, and that way I'll get a nice clean exit hole with a backer board on there. And from there we're going to start gluing up this chair once we get all of these holes made. In total there will be 10 holes, 3 in the back of the chair's uprights each, that's 6, and then 2 in each one of these. So a total of 10 1/4-inch holes. So the way I'm going to mark the center of each of these is I have one of my Veritas setup blocks here, and this is a 3/8 setup block. We know that this is 3/4, so half of 3/4 is 3/8, and I'm just going to sit that setup block up against one of the shoulders of the dado here, and I'm just going to give a little mark across that. And let me just see if I can show you that. Hopefully you can see that, but we've got the center mark for that particular piece. So I'm going to go to each one and I'm going to mark the horizontal center line. With all the horizontal center lines marked, now you want to mark your vertical line. And it's as simple as laying your tape measure down inside of your dado, getting a measurement, in this case it's 2 inches, and then I will just mark the center line on my already existing horizontal center line. So that's a good method to mark it. I'm going to go through and mark all these, then we're going to take them over, we're going to drill them up, and then we're going to start the glue up. Now it's time for the glue up. All the 1/4-inch holes are all drilled, they're ready to go. For the glue up, you want to have some water on hand to clean up any squeeze out. You want to have some rags on hand. I just have little fragments of old t-shirts here, and of course your wood glue. And for this particular glue up, at this point in time, all we're going to be concerned about is getting glue into the dado joints and getting our pieces laid into place. From there, of course, we will be clamping them in, but you want to be sure at this point in time that everything is lining up correctly. So one more dry fit is definitely going to be advised here. So I'm going to line up the pieces on the bottom legs, and we're going to glue those, or sorry, the front legs, we're going to glue those up first, and then we're going to move on to the back legs, but we don't want to do anything with them just yet, and I'll explain that why in the next segment. But for now, we want to glue up this piece here with our mortise and tenon seat support in place, and of course our one shelf here. We won't worry about the top of the seat for now. So we're going to get that glued up, clamped up, and I will also advise that as you're clamping and gluing, make sure you're checking between your legs and your shelves that everything is square, because things can go off kilter at this point in time. So I'll go ahead and glue that up. What we've got here now is the back of the chair put back together in a dry fit configuration, and it's just temporarily clamped. And what you want to do is you just want to go through and verify that everything is lining up. And if for here, I'm just verifying that the seat is centered on the chair. once you get everything lined up and verified, what you want to do at that point in time then is you want to take your pencil and you want to scribe a line inside along this corner, giving a mark on the underside of your seat. And it doesn't have to be a long line, just a little inch, inch and a half maybe, and that will mark the inside of your seat. Now we can take it apart, and what we're going to do is we're going to line up our holes, because as I said earlier, I want to put a hidden dowel joint in here just to strengthen it a little bit. So at this point in time now, we're going to take this apart again now that we have those lines scribed on there. We've got our chair taken apart, and we have both of our backs clamped to the side of the bench. And what we're going to do is on this flat surface here where our seat gets mounted, we're going to mark a center line at 3/8 of an inch along here. And this will be our line for drilling into for our dowel. So at 3/8 of an inch, I'm going to put a mark there. This one here isn't very dark, so I'm going to redo it. And I'm going to come in from the end of the chair going towards the back. I'm going to come in 1 inch. So we're going to mark that hole just like that, and we're going to mark it on this one 1 inch of 1 inch in from the end. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole down through each of these uprights, and it only has to be maybe 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch deep. It's not a very deep hole at all. We have our 1/4 inch hole drilled, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take a dowel center. And what a dowel center is it's this little thing right here. And what this does is when you place it down inside of this hole, you can see it's got a divot here, like a pin. And this pin now is going to mark where we're going to drill on our seat. So what you want to do is you want to take your upright and you want to line up your seat here with your dado. You want to get this put together, and then once you get it all in place and where it's supposed to be, you want to line up that scribed line on the bottom and then just give it a little rap on top with a dead blow hammer, and that will mark your hole that you need to drill for your dowel. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll drill that dowel hole, and then we'll come back and start putting together the backing of the chair. So when doing that, you can see right here, I'm trying to pinpoint it there, there's a very concise mark as to where you're going to drill your hole. So now I'm going to go ahead and drill this, and then we're going to put together the backings of this chair. We have our holes drilled in the bottom of our seat, and of course the hole drilled in our upright. And now with just a 1/4 inch walnut dowel, that'll be glued into place just like that. And during the glue up, what you're going to want to do is line up your dowel into your hole, and then this will just slide right into there and slide into your dado, and it'll all clamp and glue together, and that dowel will be an extra support and an extra bit of strength to hold this entire assembly down and in place where you want it to be. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and glue this all up in the same fashion as what we did the front section, again making sure that you clean up all the squeeze out and checking for square all the way along so that you don't have mishaps. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll see you when that's done. For those of you that just did that glue up, if you didn't prepare like what I said with water, rags, things to clean up all of the squeeze out, you know, a helper would be great. I didn't have one, and what a hell of a mess. But anyway, if you didn't do all that prep, I'm really sorry about the mess you got to clean up now, because it's going to be brutal. But anyway, now we're going to move on to putting the top on our front set of legs. We are going to do this in the exact same fashion as what we did the other one, where we're going to drill our holes. We're going to do 4 1/4-inch holes, 2 on either side in our uprights, and then we're going to place our dowel centers in there, line up our top so that it's perfectly aligned, and once we get it nicely aligned, going to give it a little wrap, and it's going to mark the holes for us. We're going to drill our holes, and then we're going to glue this piece on to our top. So what I've done is I've made a bunch of 1/4-inch dowels on the router table, and I did a demonstration video of that jig some time ago, but I've cut them into 2-inch pieces, and you can see here I've got the front legs of the chair. I don't need to show you every hole to show you how to do this, but remember our holes that we drilled here earlier, and there's some squeeze out in there from the glue and what have you. Anyway, what we're going to do is I've got a 1/4-inch bit here, and I've got it taped off at roughly 1.5 inches. And what we're going to do is just going to line this up in our hole that we drilled, and we're going to use that as a guideline to drill down through our hole and into our shelf, giving us a 1/4-inch hole that should be 3/4 of an inch down into this hole. Once you get that hole drilled, you want to take some wood glue and get it into that hole. And I mean, get it on that little piece of dowel as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to put it in this hole, and using a little mallet, we're just going to tap that into there until it bottoms out. That's good and solid, and now we're just going to clean up the squeeze out around it and then carry on with the next step. Once you get the squeeze out done, you want to trim this dowel off flush, and for that I'm going to use a flush cut saw. Now the flush cut saw cuts on the pull of the saw, not on the push, so you just want to carefully trim that off. And now with a little bit of sanding here, I'll just show you what we're going to end up with. So just give it a little sanding. Really should have put on a mask for that, I guess, but anyway, I just want to show you here, this is the joint. And that dowel is in there, it's nice and flush, it blends in, it's made out of the same species, and once this gets a finish on it, that will darken ever so slightly, but that's going to give a nice little detail on there and provide a heck of a lot of strength to this shelf. So I'm going to go around now and complete the rest of these, and then we'll come back to you. You've got all the dowels put in and everything is put together except for the top of the stool up here when it's in the stool configuration. But we're going to put that on last because it's just easier that way. But now we're going to put the hinge on, and there's a lot of people that have problems with hinges, and for this particular project, some of you may not agree with this method, but this is the way I'm doing it. My show. Anyway, I've got it set in the stool configuration, and I've got everything lined up. I've checked it, everything is where it should be. Everything is square, and what I'm going to do now, I needed a piano hinge, and I had to cut this one, but I'm not even sure what I cut it to because I just cut it to what I needed. But 14 inches is the size of the piano hinge. I couldn't get one that size. I had to buy a 24-inch and then cut it down with an angle grinder. Anyway, what you want to do is you want to center this rib or the hinge pin with the center of where the two pieces meet. So in other words, the edge of these boards will be the center of your hinge pin. Then you want to center it left to right. And then once you get that done and everything's lined up, clamp it in place. Once you get it clamped in place, mark a couple of the holes. Once you get a couple of the holes marked, then you want to just tack this hinge into place. So I'm just going to put the two end holes or screws here and the two end screws on the opposite side to start with. And then I'm going to test its operation. I'm using brass screws to attach this hinge, and I'm telling you, if you've never used brass screws, do yourself a favor, save all the cussing and the swearing, and drill a pilot hole before you put that screw in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark the end two holes on either end of the hinge. I'm going to drill my pilot holes, I'm going to screw it in, and then I'm going to take it for a test run. And we've got the hinge just tacked in, and I think it looks great. I mean, I'm going to need to put, or I'm going to want to put a rubber bumper in between these two wooden slats here, just to give it a little bit of a cushion when it closes. But I mean, the action is good and it sits nicely. So I think I'm going to just carry on now and put the rest of this hinge together, and then we're going to mount the top of the step. Well, the last step of assembly here is going to be putting this top step on. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drill some holes and use the dowel method that I used before, the invisible dowel method. So I'll be drilling 4 holes in the top of here. I'll be putting my dowel centers in those holes, aligning up my top just as I did before, giving it a firm tap, drilling some other entry holes, and then I'll be gluing this all together. Hardly any clamps needed, but I'm going to clamp it anyway. And there you have it. That's it. 5 weeks of work sitting right here. One thing I did add was a couple of rubber bumpers that go in between these spots right here, so that when you fold the chair up, you're not getting it to bang the wood together. This thing still requires some hand sanding, and it requires now a finish, of course, but you don't need a video of how to do that right now. So from chair, a quick flip, and you've got your step stool, and then just as quickly as what you flipped it from the step stool, of course, you can flip it right back to your chair configuration. So that's it. It's a great project. Guys, it was a lot of fun. I hope the video wasn't too long for you. I know 5 weeks worth of videos to come up with a silly little chair may seem like a lot, but I'm sure some of you out there are going to appreciate it if you try to make your own. So guys, give this a try, and hopefully we're going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.